Hi, everyone. My name is Lonnie Bloom. I'm an audit partner here at Withum, where we provide audit, tax, and advisory services. I'm a member of our technology practice, and I co-lead our e-commerce group. I'm very excited to be here today with Dillip Rao, who is the co-founder and CEO of Sharebite. Dillip, for today's conversation, we'll be talking about the food tech industry, some of the innovations, disruptions happening in the space. The food tech landscape spans across many different verticals: food production, bioengineered foods, restaurant and retail technologies, and e-commerce, including online grocers and meal kits. Dillip, thank you for joining us today. Very excited to be here.
Thanks for having me.
If you could do a quick introduction, and then we can jump into my first question about Sharebite, which is how does Sharebite fit into the food tech industry, the ecosystem, and would you consider yourself a disruptor in this space?
Lonnie, thanks for having me again. So you mentioned the phrase food tech, and we're quasi food tech because we're a mission-driven meal benefits platform, and we're built exclusively for companies, right? So we have, we tend to sort of get grouped into food tech. We kind of are, but we're also HR tech too, right? So the key thing that we do is help empower, heads of total rewards, heads of benefits, heads of HR, C-suite execs on how to best engage their employees with a benefit, which is a meal stipend that helps engage employees. Right? It's across the board. The product has a very high utilization rate. So I'll get into all that stuff into why we do that. Would we consider ourselves a disruptor in the space? That depends, because that must mean that there's like a prior model of what we do that exists. There is one model, right, that previously used to be dominated by a company called Seamless, now known as Grubhub. They essentially had a monopoly in this space, but they were largely structured as a corporate food ordering or food delivery service, and they catered to companies. Right. So when we came around, we did disrupt that model, but our vision was slightly bigger than that, or not slightly, considerably bigger than that. We always envisioned ourselves as a category creating company, and our vision as an organization is to get every worker in America fed, and we want to power that. Right. And it's not a novel idea, because if you go across the globe, like in 40 countries, nearly 40 countries across the globe, it's actually a standard practice to offer your employees what's called a meal voucher, right? So it's as common as, salary, a health insurance, right? And all these other things. Meal vouchers up there. And, the United States is the only country, right? And one of the few sort of OECD countries, right? Developed nations, where that's not a standard practice. So we're actually kind of spearheading, we're sort of category creating in that space. Yes, we disrupted the previous model of what may have existed. But, over the last few years, we've really accelerated that vision to getting every worker in America fed. And today, the type of companies that use us are literally category leading companies across every industry.
That's great, Dillip. Perfect intro. When I think of your company, I think of a disruption just because of your mission, right? We hear about Seamless and Grubhub and, DoorDash and things like that, but your mission certainly sets you guys apart. I know we'll talk about it a little bit later. Dillip, getting into my next question, what are some of the barriers to entering this market, right? We mentioned DoorDash, we mentioned Seamless and Grubhub, who have accumulated such a large share of the market, although they're largely focused on the consumer segment. Is this barrier to entry, was this a problem starting out for Sharebite, and is it an ongoing problem or threat to the company?
Yeah. Just as you said, the companies you just mentioned are best in class operators, but on the consumer side of things, right? The thing that it's a very high barrier to entry, right, to the market, because we sell directly to the enterprise. And selling to the enterprise, selling to corporate customers comes with it's a totally different ballgame. It's a totally different beast. So you've got to have the most perfect product You've got to have literally every single use case, edge case, like planned out. The product has to be so robust that it's better than the whatever the incumbent platform was. For us, that was seamless. So the average customer. So prior to Sharebite, most of our customers ended up, being on the seamless platform. Right. So the average customer that switched over to Sharebite was on the seamless platform for, on average 18 years, right? Which is crazy. And so they never really they essentially had a monopoly in the space, right? So servicing corporate clients. And the restaurants also benefit too, right? So nowadays what has happened is as sort of food delivery has become a thing, right? Like there's not a single person that doesn't understand what food delivery is today, at least on the consumer side of things. These third-party platforms have kind of, stepped in and said, look, Lonnie Bloom, he used to call you, to order directly and you would deliver it. Now you got to go through me and you got to pay me for that, right? So that has upset some restaurant operators because, a lot of restaurants, they're low margin. They can't afford that. So they either make it up with price increases or they pass it through to you or something of that sort. The interesting thing is the corporate segment has been, is, and will always be the only sort of remaining swath of, I guess, order transaction volume for restaurants that is always additive, almost often additive, right? So it's not like cannibalizing the existing customer that used to be in front of you. When we work with small businesses and restaurants, we go to them and say, look, we're not bringing you one-off orders. We're literally bringing you like hundreds of orders, on a recurring basis, right? So restaurants love that because they get to, there's, economies of scale. They get to produce that stuff, much faster, and it's more cost effective for them. So they actually get to make a profit on that stuff while, still, providing the service, and also they get to, have this recurring access to corporate business. And, there's also a spillover effect of that, which we don't necessarily capitalize on. We allow the customer to kind of do their own, sort of supporting that restaurant. If we have a restaurant that a user at one of our corporate clients loves, there's a good chance that they'll end up supporting that restaurant outside of the scope of like, at the office or, the meal stipend that they have. So for us, it was a very, very high barrier to entry. And that's why in the earliest days, I went to like hundreds of investors, like, look, we're going to build like, sort of the category leading company. We're going to topple the Seamless kind of monopoly in the space in the corporate, arena. That's how Seamless started, by the way. And then they kind of waded into the consumer side. So very, very high barrier to entry. And the sales cycles tend to be like unsustainably long, right? And but we've always been a mission-driven company. We met many, many years ago, and the vision of the organization has been the same. And it's like anything else, right? First slowly and then suddenly. So if you look at our growth over the last, year, let alone the last 2 years, it's just been like exponential. To build essentially a competitor to Sharebite, or now that we're the incumbent. So many of the top sort of 50 customers of the previous sort of monopoly in the space have largely switched over to Sharebite, right? And so we don't really look at, one of our company values is like, you can be, I think it's Amazon or, Intel or something like that. It's like, we're competitor aware, but we're customer obsessed, right? So we've always been obsessed with our customers. For us, it was a very high barrier to entry, but we were unrelenting. This team was vested in this mission. We were going to build the category leading company for meal benefits in the United States. And today we are closer to that vision than we have ever been in the company's history.
That's great. I'm super happy to hear that. I know we met, 5+ years ago when we, you helped us cater a tacos and margaritas at a WeWork event, right? So that was earlier when you were starting out, but it's great to hear that. See, when I think of your industry, I think of logistics and possible distribution nightmare, right? With the growing reliance on technology, and including AI, machine learning, how has technology impacted this logistics challenge?
Yeah, great question. So we're a nerdy tech and product company, right? So like more so than anything else, if there was a way to define Sharebite, we're a nerdy, tech and engineering company. So we have leveraged, um, everyone calls it AI, but we've leveraged machine learning for some time now. And we actually stood up our own logistics sort of operation because for us, the service delivery component is the most important part, right? Because one of our largest products at Sharebite is what we call Sharebite stations. Right? So if you're working at, um, pretty much like any of these, like whether it's, large car manufacturing companies all the way to professional sports teams and tech companies and private equity firms, hedge funds, et cetera, many of these companies now offer a stipend for their employees to order lunch. Some of it adapted it during the pandemic as part of their return to the office program, and they've kept it because it was so successful. Right now, they're like, "What we could not have brought our employees back to the office without Sharebite." So, like, we have a lot of goodwill on that side. Um, so for us, partnering with not only sort of the larger players, right, that the consumer folks that do have a third party delivery thing for, but we do that on a one-off basis. But we also, even if you look at our logo right here, it looks like a flower, but it's actually three people kind of sitting around, right? So it's like those are all of our stakeholders. And one of the things that we wanted to make sure is that we supported local businesses that had just been largely cratered during the pandemic because these are like third-party delivery service providers. They were, they were struggling. So our team, what we did was we put together this technology. We basically entered into partnerships with all these, third-party delivery platforms across all the cities that we service, and we basically batch the orders. So what happens is when all of your employees, order, right, all of those orders go into the restaurant in one sort of transaction, right? So the restaurant sees it and produces it like, mass produces the, every single meal. It's all customized. And we do that across the board. So maybe the company next door to you, the building next to you, the building across the street from you. So route density is something that we really focused heavily on. And we're able to do that in a very cost-effective manner. So third-party delivery service providers, local ones, right, not the large ones, they benefit heavily because we keep them busy like pretty much all day long. Right. So there's that. So the logistics side, also a very high barrier to entry because it's very hard to do. It took us a long time to get it right. Standing it up was we tried to do it. It's expensive to do. We'd never set out to be in logistics, but now that we've been doing it for a little over now close to 3 years, we realized that like we can do this in a way where we can create a tremendous amount of value for end users and the restaurants and the local third-party delivery service providers. So they get to make money. Everybody makes money along the way. And there's a tremendous amount of value creation that happens for a lot of stakeholders along the way, every single time that a transaction goes through. So from a technology standpoint, we're always leveraging machine learning. We mostly use that stuff for internal purposes, but for customer facing to make operations, much more, streamlined internally. But we have turned our attention to how can we leverage some of the tools that we already use internally to make the user experience much better. So that's an ongoing thing. And from a logistics standpoint, it's on, we've built a set of rails, right? So we always we look at everything that we do in the organization, not from a process, but more of a systems kind of lens. And that systems lens, like everything has to be on its own set of rails. So logistics has now essentially turned into its own product, but we only use it for ourselves. Maybe down the line, we could probably, commercialize that to others, because I know that this is a large pain point for many other companies.
Oh yeah, it's super interesting to see and hear the technology that goes on behind the scenes, right? From a consumer perspective, you always just, you get frustrated when an order goes through and you don't get it in time, right? That's all you think about. You don't think about all the tech that goes on behind the scenes to make it happen, and to hear that you're kind of consolidating these, you know, you think of a restaurant getting a ticket for an order, you don't want 100 tickets, you want one or two consolidated, and it sounds like that's what you guys are doing, which is, beating those inefficiencies and making things better for both the restaurant and Sharebite, which is great.
Yeah.
So looking ahead to the future of technology, what are some of the technologies the company's investing in, and just for the food, tech industry in general, are there any sort of technologies that you think will be the next big disruption?
There's so much technology out there. There's so many exciting things, because as you can see, like restaurants it's a massive market, right? If we're talking about particular restaurants, and there are and it's very fragmented too. So when you have fragmentation of that scale and size, and people kind of focused on one area altogether, there are so many companies out there. If you go to any of these restaurant conferences, you see people that are just building things that you never thought was even a problem. But the thing that excites me the most is that they are building these tools to help these small businesses at restaurants, because oftentimes when people start a restaurant, it's a labor of love, and they do it because they love doing that. Everybody eats, and the better you are, the more competitive you are, the tastier your food is. The customers love you, and most sort of restaurateurs kind of stop there, right? They don't think about all the enabling mechanisms of like the tech stack, or like, how do I sign up for a third party sort of delivery platform? How do I market myself? How do I do this at scale? So I don't know that I would necessarily call it disruption, but I would much rather sort of refer to it as innovation, right? So this is the only thing that's being disrupted is kind of the old way, which is like, I'm just going to deal with the problem, right? So there's a lot of innovative stuff happening, from robotics all the way to, you probably saw Sweetgreen, which is one of our partners. They launched their own sort of robotic, kitchen, and there are a lot of restaurants that are exploring stuff like that. So it's a very highly evolving ecosystem, not only the downstream side, but also on the production side of things, right? So the ag tech, a dear friend of mine, Edward Chandrovich, runs a company called Synonym, and it's like, biomanufacturing, right? So the stuff that those guys are doing, it's just like space age stuff. And so I'm really excited about where we are, that food tech entire ecosystem from upstream all the way to downstream is going to evolve in the next 5 to 10 years. It's very, very exciting to see.